Hello everyone. So today in this lecture we will study about the basic introduction to the cell chapter. So we will study in this what is cell and introduction to the cell theory. So as we all know that all organisms consist of one or more cells, and according to this we have described organisms into two parts. Firstly, the unicellular organisms like the amoeba, diatoms, paramecium, and the multicellular organisms like the plants and animals. So unicellular organisms are consist of only a single cell, means all the processes will occur only in a single cell. But in a multicellular organisms, they are made up of one or more different kinds of cells. So on the basis of this, we will first describe the level of organisms. So what is this level of organisms? It is basically how the multicellular organisms perform their work, how the cells gather together, how the cells perform their work in a coordination manner. That is the level of organizations. That basically how a human being or how a plant, animals functions or performs, how the things performs inside the cells. So as we all know that the structural part is the cell, so level of organization begins with a cell, a single cell, and when the two or more cells groups together, so they form a tissue. When the different tissues came together and they perform a similar functions, then they are organized into an organ. We will say that it is an organ. And when different organisms coordinate together to perform a function, then it forms an organ system, and which our human body is obviously made up of. So as we all know, the basic difference between the unicellular and the multicellular organisms. So don't a question arise in your mind that how these unicellular organisms evolved with us? So the basic features of the unicellular organism that help them to support life is firstly the independent existence. That a single cell is performing all the functions like the osmoregulation, like the excretion, like digestion, respiration, everything will be performed in a single cell like an amoeba. So firstly, they are independent existence, means they do not want any other things or any other structural functions to support their life. And secondly, performing the essential functions of life, as I have told that osmoregulation, digestion, excretion, respiration, everything will be performed in a single cell. For example, if you will take an example of paramecium, so contractile vacuoles are there for the osmoregulation process, and food vacuoles are there for the digestion and the storage of food, cilia for locomotion, flagella for locomotion. These all structures are there or present in a single cell only. So that's why they are capable to evolve with us. So after knowing all these things, how can we define a cell? So cell is a fundamental, structural and the functional unit of every living organisms. Now we have known everything about cell, so let's study about some discoveries behind it. So Robert Hooke, he discovered a cell. Firstly, he discovered a cell, but not a living cell. He discovered a dead cell from a cork. But Antoine von Leeuwenhoek, he was the first person who discovered the living cells that are capable of moving, such as the bacteria, protozoa, spermatozoa, and the red blood corpuscles. And why don't say RBCs at red blood corpuscles and not red blood cells? We will study this in the chapter called circulation. So it was the Antoine von Leeuwenhoek who had discovered the microscope firstly. He discovered microscope, you can say, and saw the living structures first time. And there is one more name called the Robert Brown. He discovered the nucleus inside a cell. We will study what is the nucleus and its features. So he discovered the nucleus inside the cell for the first time under a microscope. So now we will study about the cell theory, and cell theory was basically discovered by three scientists independently. That means all the three have discovered their own things separately. They don't work together. So the names are Matthias Claden, Theodor Schwann and Rudolf Virchow. So what the Matthias Claden had done, he was a German botanist who studied a large number of plants and observed that all plants are composed of different kinds of cells which form tissues of the plant. So basically he discovered the plant cell in short. Now another scientist known as Theodor Schwann, he was a British geologist and studied different type of animal cells, and he was the first to report the plasma membrane. You can say that he had discovered plasma membrane as a thin outer layer. And another thing he had discovered, like the plant plant cell wall, which is a unique character of plant. He had described this thing. So Theodor Schwann, on his discovery, after his discovery, he formulated a theory like the plants and animals are composed of cells and their products. He said this statement, which is basically something true, 90% true. So firstly, the cell theory was discovered by Sladen and Schwann, means they together formulated a cell theory, but it does not explain that how the new cells are formed. So now we will study about the cell theory, and cell theory was basically discovered by three scientists independently. That means all the three have discovered their own things separately. So this Sladen and Schwann, they together formulated a cell theory. However, this theory was not 100% correct. It has some missings, and that missing was how the new cells were formed. They gave the postulates of the cell theory about their working and functions, but they did not explain that how new cells are formed. So their theory was incomplete, which was further completed by the Rudolf Virchow. He explained that cells divide and new cells are formed from pre-existing cells. And the statement, or the word you can say, which he gave, omnis cellula e cellula, that was the most important word, means it comes in many competitive examinations, omnis cellulae e cellula. So you have to remember this word. He modified the hypothesis of Sladen and Schwann to give the cell theory a final shape. Now the cell theory have three main points, and the first point was all living organisms are composed of cells and the product of cells, which the Theodor Schwann has given in his statement before only. Second point, all cells arise from pre-existing cells, which was given by the Rudolf Virchow in omnis cellulae cellula. That was a very important feature. And third, the activities of an organism are the outcome of sum total of activities and interactions of the constituent cells. The meaning of this statement is that the things that we see or the product that we get is the sum total of all the activities and the interactions that the cell have with each other. We have seen in the level of organizations how from a cell tissue is formed, and from tissue organ, and from organ to an organ system. So the things that we get or the product that we get is basically the interactions between different kinds of cells inside our body, or we can say that the metabolic function of all the cells activities that cells perform with each other and interact with each other. So the product that we get is the sum total of all the activities of the cells, in short.